मुझे કહી શકાય કે તે ભૂલ કરે છે.
Under these circumstances, if some individual is worrying about himself, we must call it a mistake.
Welcome to the voice and to the heart of Babaji. What did you hear? Just call out. What did you hear? Pardon me? Gentleness, love, peace, compassion, warmth, discernment. Yes. All of these qualities of a teacher of God. As we hear this tape, we hear Babaji speaking of divine protection, a concept some might call naive, even baseless or simplistic. But for Babaji, the words are spoken without apology and with humble conviction. You can hear that. You know that as you hear them, he has lived this spiritual truth. There's no self-consciousness and no reservation. That he has contacted this truth within himself is so clear that we know it stirs that same knowing in our own heart. Divine protection is. This soul quality of speaking spiritual truth without reservation and speaking it with integrated conviction is a soul quality we hear in the lives of all great teachers. It invites us to ask ourselves, can I, will I speak the seemingly unfamiliar or the unpopular without fear and hesitation, without fear of sounding simple or even revolutionary? And if I do sound that way, why not? We are called to be teachers of God, and in the words of artist Robert Henri, we are called to disturb, we are called to inspire, and we are called to enlighten. In my own teaching, the spiritual truth of grace is one that for many years I held under the wraps of self-censorship. I thought I would sound too simple if I talked about grace publicly and possibly offend some. But grace is such a palpable part of my experience of divinity in my spiritual life. I was creating a cleavage between myself and my spiritual path and my teaching. Finally, I started to speak about grace in my teaching and in my coaching. And that very speaking started to generate all sorts of dialogue with the people I teach and in my coaching. There it all came. Who is I to deny that? A second soul quality we hear in Babaji is integration of his life curriculum into his teachings. Babaji's own descent into moments of despair and struggle is sometimes explained, but in other times it's there in the ether between his words. As he speaks of trust in God, as he speaks of release of worry, you know that he's arrived at these words not by studying spiritual texts, but by the direct experience of his own life. Babaji tried to kill himself 4 times without success. Yes, some of you didn't know that. Yes. By the time of his 5th attempt, he describes that he had fallen out of love with his life and that his heart was filled with darkness. It was out of life experiences like these that Babaji was then able to teach about struggle. In his famous discourse on the angel of struggle, he stirs the soul, and in it he reminds us that despair often precedes the next level of consciousness. His words touch us because some part of us knows he's lived this. Babaji dignified his suffering. I'm going to say that again. Babaji dignified his suffering. And he saw it as God Shakti and used it to fuel his great delivery of great wisdom. This quality calls us to ask ourselves, to what extent do we allow our life experiences to inform our teaching? My childbirth, my bout with cancer, my love for nature, my long-awaited sobriety, my devotion to my wife. They all have a place in our teaching, and there's not a single life experience that for a teacher of God is not part of our holy curriculum. Babaji had very humble beginnings. He dropped out of school so he could support his family, then taught himself to read then went on to become a great scholar of the Gita. Despite his fierce devotion to his path, he struggled with human foibles like immoderate eating, attraction to wealth, to status. He had a temper, and in his early years on the path, a mind that he describes as a storehouse of conceit. All of this humanity was part of his soul journey, and none of it was tangential to his teaching. Soul qualities of courage and risk-taking, faith in God, these were all part of Babaji's teaching. And at a very young age, he was a radical. He wanted Hindus and Muslims to dine at the same table in segregated hotels, much to the consternation of others. And he did this in order to live values true to his heart. And of such acts, he said, courage is an integral part of love. And it was this love, his love for God and for the truth, that kept him risking time after time after time. When he was guided to build a temple that was going to cost 50 million rupees, all he had was a loincloth and a begging bowl. And his response to those who thought he was totally crazy was, "This task will take care of itself. I have only one thing, unshakable faith in the Lord." This one thing, unshakable faith in the Lord, was central to his teaching, to the expansion of his work, and to his sadhana. A faith in God to provide resources, a faith in God to provide direction, a faith in God to provide comfort, a faith in God to hold the future. A God that he met every day in his practice. In order to strengthen your work and your devotion, writes Babaji, all you have to do is knock on the Lord's door. God will automatically open it, already knowing the true feelings of your heart. Although I have come very close to death 5 times, I have survived by the grace of God. You will survive by the grace of God. Don't only think that you love God. God loves you very much. So whether we're setting up a new yoga studio or sending out our new course mailing, if we follow Babaji's example, the work is to be rooted in our faith, and our faith to be rooted in our practice. To the extent that we long for sustained faith, to that extent we, like other teachers of God, like Babaji, are called to honor the experiences of our life and steadfastly trust the direction of our soul. This triune relationship of intimacy with life and intimacy with soul and intimacy with God repeats in the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it's his life and legacy now that I would like to turn to. And I have to tell you, I feel so good about bringing Dr. Martin Luther King into this chapel. Because for many, many years, our yoga was fairly separate from the rest of society. And I'm glad to have society meet its place here in this room. Like Babaji, Martin Luther King had very humble beginnings. He never graduated high school, but he did go on to earn his Doctorate of Divinity degree. In 1955, at the ripe age of 26, he led the Montgomery bus boycott. 26. A month later, the victory of the boycott was won, and the buses were finally desegregated. Can we even imagine that that ever was in our nation? But this was not without a cost to Dr. King. Death threats and bombs exploding on his front porch made it clear that this teacher of God was not welcome. 10 months later, at the age of 27, Dr. King was stabbed in the chest. But still he kept studying the teachings of nonviolence of Gandhi. And still he kept encouraging his peers, we must turn our enemies into friends through love. Month after month, he was arrested for inane charges. They were all meant to discourage and to stop him. Charges like speeding 5 miles over a 25-mile speed zone, loitering on government property just because he was standing on town hall steps. But he still kept going. His mantra continued, we must turn enemies into friends through love. In 1964, Martin Luther King received the Nobel Peace Prize at the young age of 35. That same year, 3 civil rights workers were missing and later found buried in a Mississippi field. Still his mantra continued: turn enemies into friends through love. In 1966, Dr. King risked all he had achieved by taking a stand against the Vietnam War. His fellow blacks accused him of diverting his focus, and whites who had supported him felt unsupported because they had sons or daughters in the war. Yet his message as a teacher of God had to have integrity for all, and he said, I've struggled too long against segregated public accommodations to now end up segregating my moral concerns. His yoga would not be limited to one nation. He further spoke of the complacency that lives in the cavity of all of our hearts, especially when the unspoken seems safer than the spoken. But time and again, he risked his popularity, he even risked his life, so that he could deliver the truth as he knew it. By his own admission, there was discouragement and, like Babaji, despair. But he kept going, gaining renewed resolve and strength because of his relationship with the divine. Renewed strength because of his relationship with the divine. He said, I say to you, seek God and make him a power in your life. Without the divine, all of our efforts turn to ashes and our sunrises into darkest nights. But with the divine, we rise from the fatigue of despair and rise into the buoyancy of hope. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the breath of life. But don't forget that there's a higher and greater commandment, to love the Lord, the divine, with all your heart and soul. This is the height of life. And when you do this, you live the complete life. With this power of God and buoyancy of hope, Martin Luther King gave us a dream of equality for all, a dream that upset the status quo. I invite you to now hear his words, spoken on August 28, 1963. As you did with Babaji, please listen for the soul qualities of Martin Luther King as a teacher of God. Thank you.
Sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Where would we be without that voice? And without all that he did to live the life of a teacher of God? There's tremendous, tremendous modeling in that for us. What did you hear? Passion. Vision. Passion. Vision. Conviction. Pardon me? Hope and courage. Absolutely. Strength. Dr. King faced serious death threats at the time of this speech and was not without fear. It was known that before his speeches, he did enter into fear. Does this sound familiar? Yes. He stepped forward and spoke anyway. He was intent on doing God's will as it was called to his own heart, and he was driven onward by a soul-infused vision, a fire of soul Gandhi referred to as Satyagraha, the fire of truth. We hear his passionate resolve about what he cared about, the inspired teaching fueled by his own suffering as a black man and by his love for humanity. We hear a relentless integrity balanced by softness of humility, wanting nothing from no one except God-given equality. All of these are soul qualities that are Dr. King's legacy. There's one more soul quality, though, that I would like to point out to you, and that is Dr. King's fearless use of his inner talents. He had a way with words, a poetry and a passion most certainly connected to his soul. His voice, his emotionality, his imagery. All of these were true to him and true to his soul. Babaji had the same quality, at one moment using his natural gift of humor, the next moment using his skills as a playwright, the next moment feeling free to cry if he felt moved. Both teachers used their gifts in service of God and in service of the curriculum they were called to teach. 15 years ago, this soul quality of using inner gifts was challenged in me by a Dutch woman named Marian Vandenberg. I was in the Netherlands, and she wanted to know who the author was of some of the quotes I had up on newsprint. And I told her one was Babaji and one was Pema Chodron, and there was one left blank, and she said, "Whose is that?" And I went, "Hmm." And she said, "Whose?" And I went, "Hmm." She said, "Whose?" And I said, "Mine." She said, "Your name needs to be up there." And I said, "Well," and she said, "Well, it's irresponsible. Gifts are your good fortune. They're not to be hidden under a bushel." And then she lectured me about someday needing to write a book. And I said, "Well, we'll see." Now I at least put my name on my newsprints. But this soul quality of putting our natural talents to use to empower our teaching is something worth making deliberate and conscious. What are your natural, God-given talents? Perhaps it's your voice quality, or your humor, or your musicality, or your love of dance. Could any one or more of those find their way into your teaching more? They are your good fortune to be used without a